Hi guys, my name is Miski, and this summer I did research under the Department of Food Science and Nutrition alongside Dr. Joanne Flavin and a master's student, Jacob Larson, and we looked into the mechanisms of dietary fiber on obesity-related disorders. To start, dietary fiber is known to decrease risk of cardiovascular disease and obesity. However, the most important mechanisms for fiber's protective properties are still debated. Mechanisms for this protection include decreased absorption of glucose and lipids, as well as enhanced satiety at future meals. Emerging mechanisms such as alterations of the gut microbiome of metabolites such as short-chain fatty acids may explain fiber's role in obesity prevention and treatment. As sort of an introduction, fiber is typically linked with optimal health, and higher fiber intakes are linked to lower body weight and lower incidence of chronic disease such as cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. Dietary fiber is comprised of non-digestible carbohydrates, which can be soluble or insoluble, as well as lignin, which is a plant material. These have been shown to have anti-obesity effects that are linked to gut mechanisms such as the microbiota and short-chain fatty acids. This review is intended to discuss the latest research on mechanisms whereby fibers and prebiotics can prevent or treat obesity and associated chronic disease in human subjects. Articles were collected through the U of M library and other online databases using keywords such as dietary fiber, gut microbiota, short-chain fatty acids, and obesity. As a quick background, the known physiological benefits of fiber are wide. The following is a summary of notable benefits supported at the 8th Vahoni Fiber Symposium, and the benefits are as follows: increased satiety, reduction of blood total or LDL cholesterol, which is also known as like the harmful cholesterol, attenuation of insulinemia or postprandial glycemia, decreased transit time, increased colonic fermentation, and short-chain fatty acids, as sort of an lower incidence of chronic disease such as which can be soluble or insoluble, a reduction of blood pressure, increased fecal bulk and laxation, and weight loss. The FDA considers the above benefits as justification for allowing functional fibers to be claimed as dietary fiber in the United States. For a 2,000 kcal diet, recommended intakes of dietary fiber is set at 28 grams per day, and this value has been set by epidemiological data by the United States and Canada from results of 4 prospective cohort studies that found 14 grams per 1,000 calories consumed of fiber reduced incidence of cardiovascular disease. One mechanism in particular that we looked into was the regulation of energy expenditure and substrate oxidation by short-chain fatty acids. As we know, fat is stored in adipose tissue as triglycerides. These triglycerides are released into the bloodstream via the actions of a hormone-sensitive lipase, where they can then be oxidized or burned into energy. Fat oxidation is essentially burning fat for fuel. Short-chain fatty acids are the primary products of the breakdown of non-digestible carbohydrates by gut bacteria. Collectively, they are a major source of energy for colon cells, and we can increase the production of these health-promoting compounds by increasing our consumption of fiber. Traditionally, short-chain fatty acid production is obtained by fecal samples, and then we measure the short-chain fatty acids that are present in the stool. Some researchers found that the short-chain fatty acids and substrate oxidation raise energy expenditure via the promotion of lipid oxidation. In order to maintain body weight, energy intake must equal energy expenditure. Increased energy expenditure will result in weight loss. The second mechanism that we looked at in this review is colonic fermentation. It has long been appreciated that dietary fiber is fermented in the gut, which results in lower pH, changes in microbiota, and changes in short-chain fatty acids and other metabolites. So there are 2 main types of colonic fermentation: sacriletic fermentation and proteolytic fermentation. Sacriletic fermentation is fermentation of dietary fibers and other carbohydrates that occurs mainly in the proximal colon. Short-chain fatty acids are produced here along with other important metabolites, and these may contribute to less obesity and related disorders. As for proteolytic fermentation, this is fermentation of peptides and other proteins, which mainly appears in the distal colon and can yield harmful products such as ammonia, phenols, and long-chain fatty acids, which is ultimately detrimental to the host health. A switch from proteolytic to saccharine fermentation may be more beneficial for the host and could also explain why high fiber intake is protective against chronic disease such as obesity, cardiovascular disease, and type 2 diabetes. Experiments in mice found that low fiber diets are linked to decreased short chain fatty acid production and insufficient G protein coupled receptors signaling leading to cardiovascular disease. As a conclusion, plant foods containing dietary fibers are widely promoted for their health effects, including protection against obesity. Mechanisms for this protection are many and are difficult to summarize due to the different functions and the characteristics of fiber source. Thus far, the satiating effect of fiber and the fermentation of fiber in the gut resulting in changes of the microbiota and other metabolites, for example, short-chain fatty acids, have been accepted in the literature. Despite the early promise of significant differences in the microbiota of obese and lean human subjects, follow-up studies have been less convincing. Various factors are to be considered when examining alterations of the gut microbiota. The physiological benefits of many and extend beyond the GI tract, as we discussed earlier. For future studies, we'd like to look in, so far we know that the link between obesity and the gut microbiota remains unclear. Some researchers have proposed microbiota independent reasons that may explain weight loss induced by a whole grain fiber-rich diet, including increasing satiety, satiation, energy exertion from stool, energy expenditure, which ultimately decreases energy. And we would like to see more intervention studies that examine changes in specific colonic bacteria or increase in specific short-chain fatty acids, which would be necessary to further explore this relationship. And so I'd like to thank Heidi, Vicky, the whole MSROP team, the cohort, for making this summer very memorable and full of experiences. I'd also like to thank my mentor, Dr. Slavin, for mentoring me and giving me the opportunity to work in her lab. This is a very unprecedented summer, but I'm glad that we were able to pull through. Any questions?
Hi, Miski. Is there any way that that fiber shifts from the saccharilitic digestion to the proteolytic, or sorry, the other way around? Because proteolytic is associated with poorer outcomes, right?
Yeah, so it's not that the fiber shifts from one to the other. Carbohydrates or other fibers are more seen in that proximal part of the colon where the carbohydrate fermentation takes place. And that's why it's more associated with decreased obesity and chronic disease outcomes. And the proteolytic is where majority protein fermentation occurs. So more like when we're thinking like meats, heavy dairy products with a lot of protein, other protein sources, that's where they would be fermented. And then that's where we see the outcomes of increased chronic disease and harmful byproducts.
I see. So it's not the presence of fiber that shifts, it's the fiber itself, or it's replacing like the dairy in your diet with fiber, and that will lead to more of the saccharilitic fermentation.
Exactly, yep.
And what are good sources of that kind of fiber? Because just as a consumer, it's confusing to read food labels and try and figure out.
For sure. So we know that there's two different types. There's the insoluble and soluble fiber, as well as inulin. So a lot of times you could take prebiotics over the counter, or we look into like fruits and vegetables with a more thicker coating, like apples or like beans, anything with that sort of like cellulose covering really promotes the fiber digestion and access or digestion that works better than if it were like proteolytic fermentation.
Thanks.
But yeah, you're right. There are a lot of different nutrition sciences like all over the place. So it's really hard to get like a good source of like what you should eat, what you shouldn't eat, because you'll see sources all over online. And even like nutrition experts will debate on like what's optimal and what's not. So it's definitely all over the place. And the best way for now, for like the average consumer, it's best to look into, if you'd like, there are registered dietitians that could assist if somebody like truly wants to change their diet. But yeah, it's really something that you have to be skeptical about and not take at face value.
Yeah, and did you mention that there was an FDA recommendation of 14 grams?
Per 1,000 calories, or 28 grams per 2,000, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, that's great.
Of course.
So probably no like fiber 1 bars, like those, that's probably the wrong kind of fiber for this.
Fiber 1 actually does have the inulin fiber inside of it. But again, it's just like how much sugar is in it, and just like if you want pure fiber, you could go to fruits and vegetables. But that is like a one-stop shop for like quick fiber intake. But then again, you'd want to look at the ingredients and see if there's other processed ingredients that you might want to avoid in those products.
Yeah, thank you for that. It is hard being just an average consumer, so thank you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I even struggle with it all the time, and I'm a nutrition major, so.
Miski, thank you so much. What an amazing presentation. You're the first full presentation that I was able to see today. And how inspirational it is to see some of your work with Dr. Slavin. And there's more of a, Paul kind of got to what one of my questions was. I was just thinking about, how important your topic is right now. I recently was reading something in the New York Times where it was talking about the incidence of colon cancer and just how they've really gone up, and talking about the prevalence of food deserts and lack of fiber in that. And so it was really interesting to learn and hear your presentation through that limited lens that I have.
Thank you.
Hi, Miski, it's Selma. So you did an amazing job on your project, and I had a question because I know you briefly talked about prebiotics, and I want to know if that's the same as like probiotics, because like say someone drinks kombucha, which has probiotics. I was wondering if there's like a difference between that and like prebiotics that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's a great question. So probiotics are the good bacteria in your gut. They're there to sort of have that balance between the good and bad bacteria that are naturally living in your gut. And then prebiotics is a specific type of dietary fiber that works to feed the good bacteria in your gut. So a lot of times, like if you go to the doctors and you're given antibiotics, a lot of times they'll tell you to take probiotics over the counter to sort of restore that imbalance. But yeah, you can find that in kombucha, yogurts, other fermented dairy products, and they've been shown to have like a lot of good health benefits across the whole body, and not even just to the gut. I did a paper last year on probiotics and its relationship to like mental health, and it was really cool to see the relationship between like the gut-brain axis and all that good stuff. So.
Thank you. Makes sense.
Yep. Thank you.